I am so excited to be here with my good friend Doris Day, and we're going to do Deep Dish and Tell. We're going to get the deeper scoop on her life and what makes her tick, what she's interested in, and why she's been so inspirational to so many people, both in my world and the whole world for that matter. So Doris, thanks for being with me. I super appreciate it.
Oh, it's so good to be here with you. Any opportunity to spend time with you is, I'm always going to be in for that.
I'm having a hard time believing that one, but okay, I'll take it.
True.
All right, so it's great to be here in New York. You've been here, how long have you been in New York for now?
I've lived here my whole life. I still live in the same building I grew up in.
No way, really?
Yep, my mom is still there. My dad was with her till he passed. But yeah, I raised my kids there. I babysat for, grew up and babysat for my kids.
Is that weird to be in the same area that you grew up in?
No, it's actually really nice because you kind of relive your life and you go, oh, as a grown-up, you're like, you get it differently.
Yeah.
So it's like letting all the skeletons out of the closet in a way.
But did you think like when you were young, like, oh, one day I'm going to move, I'm going to live like in like, I don't know, California or some other place, Chicago or somewhere else in the world?
I wanted to go into international affairs because I've always loved traveling and I wanted to travel the world, but I also wanted to get married and have kids. So I figured I would do something sensible like be a doctor. And then as a doctor, I've traveled more around the world than I think I would have in any other profession. So I never really gave that much thought about where I would live. And living in New York is like living everywhere in the world because you're always a tourist in New York. The city's always changing. You can never really get comfortable. Things that were there one day are gone and something new and different is there the next day. And we have so many different neighborhoods and such an international flair. So it's a great city.
When you were a young girl growing up in New York, did you always want to be a doctor?
Yes and no. I wanted to be lots of things. I wanted to be an architect. I used to say I wanted to be a doctor. My dad's a doctor. His brother's a doctor, all my cousins are doctors, all the women are doctors, everybody's a doctor, so it was like sort of the normal thing to be exposed to. And when we would drive, my dad had a house, we had a house in the Hamptons, so when we would drive on weekends, because we'd go all year round, we would do the circulatory system as like our car game. We'd go from the heart to the aorta, all around to the capillaries, the venules, and then back up to the heart. So that was like our fun car game. And so my dad was really into teaching and really into medicine.
So this kind of influenced you to want to be a doctor one day?
I think it made it so that it was normal to be around doctor things. Yeah. And he always came home and told stories about his patients. So it's like the family business in a way. And then as I got older, I was his biller and his secretary because he was an anesthesiologist. And so I would get to speak to his patients and they would tell me stories about how they didn't suffer after the surgery because he would hypnotize them.
Wait, he's an anesthesiologist. How did you talk to his patients?
Because it'd be billing questions or scheduling questions. So they would always schedule around him, not the surgeon. Because there was no Zofran then or any of the antiemetics, the anti-nausea medicines. So it was really up to the anesthesiologist's skill to help you not be sick after the surgery. And then we all have like these transforming things in our lives. So I have an older brother who's 12 months and 11 days older, and I have a sister who was 18 months younger. And my sister and I, we were inseparable. We shared a room. We slept in the same bed many nights. We were always together. My mom used to dress us alike growing up. So we used to say we had invisible glue and nobody could separate us because we were so connected and really attached. And I felt responsible for her. I was 18 months older, and even though I used to call her my little big sister because she was so beautiful and so talented, and I really looked up to her in so many ways. But I also felt responsible for her. And sometimes when we would go to sleep, I would just hold her hand just to make sure nothing happened to her. And then one day when she was 13, she showed me a lump in her groin and she said, "Don't tell anybody."
Wait, you were 15 at the time?
I was 14, she was 13. I was almost 15. And then it turned out that she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I didn't tell anyone, and she suffered horribly. I mean, back then, there were no medicines around these cancer treatments. So you go to the hospital, and they do horrific things to children.
I'm getting like...
I know.
Like the thought I didn't know this story, and this is like incredible to hear this. So she's 13, and she gets diagnosed, and I mean, your parents,
6 months and it was done.
like what?
Yeah, so
In 6 months, she passed away?
in 6 months she passed away. And the dying of it didn't upset me as much. I mean, it took me a long time, and I learned a lot about complicated grief. I mean, I really think that I can talk about it this way now with a little bit of distance and not kind of falling apart, because I worked really hard to sort of figure out how to rewire that part of my brain that still wants to connect with her.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about grief and how grief and sadness are two very different things. Grief is, like, if you wanted to call somebody you care about, you pick up the phone and they're going to pick up within a matter of seconds, right? If they're traveling, when they land, they're going to call you and you can connect right away. So your expectation in your brain is when you want to reach somebody, they're there. And then when they're not there, it's like reaching for a glass, and every time you reach for it, you can feel the glass, but it just keeps moving out of your way. And you can't grasp what it is that you're missing. And so your brain has to figure that out, but it takes work to do that. And in my culture, in my family, the dynamic was the day she died, her name was never mentioned again. So I went to school the next day like nothing happened, and there was a real stigma around loss. So I was embarrassed to even say anything because people wouldn't want to be my friend because they would think that I could give them something. So I had so much guilt around feeling responsible for her, feeling like I had caused this, like I didn't do anything about it. But I was as helpless as it gets. I didn't recognize that I was just a kid.
I believe in life we have pivot points, and we have a point in our life where we switch on a dime and we go into a different direction. And I think we can all look back and find those pivot points. Was her passing a pivot point for you?
I think in a way, but it wasn't a point. It was decades. It was a pivot set of decades, because I didn't cry for like 10 years over it. I gained 50 pounds. I went into, I just had a really hard time. And college was a blur. Being an English major and studying philosophy was my savior, because when you study Nietzsche and Schopenhauer and Kant, all those people talk about life and about survival. And literature is about life and loss and survival. So, and it's also about medicine, because people get sick in these books, and it's the stories of their care and what they go through. So going to Barnard, I went to college in the city because I couldn't leave my parents, even though I didn't want to be around them. Did this push you towards
medicine?
In a way, I mean, I was an English major, and then I did my pre-med after college, and then I did journalism because I wanted to tell her story. So I became a medical reporter to talk about hospice care and quality of life over length of life. But part of me wanting to be a doctor was I thought that if I could understand what happens to people and like why these things happen, it wouldn't feel so bad. So I realized it doesn't work that way.
Do you ever still feel her?
I do, but it's different than it was before I was able to process the grief. So I used to feel her in the form of guilt and in the form of pain. Now I feel her in the form of a beautiful memory, and I feel her in a way that just makes me a stronger person. I think when you go through something that horrible and painful and that kind of loss of somebody who is such a strong part of you, what happens is that you're living in a parallel world to most other people. Because in your mind, these things don't just happen to other people. When I had children and they were hitting that age, I had to live with the idea that something could happen to my children or people I love. And now I have a grandbaby. You love them, but you know that this is finite. So the pivot for me was philosophical in the sense that I had to figure out the meaning of life from a young age, from a perspective of a unevolved brain. And part of that was medical and science, because I want to understand how the body works and how to stay healthy. And now my focus is on longevity. So I studied
What about religion? Did it make you more or less religious when your sister passed?
It made me both in a way. Like initially less, because you want to be angry at something, you get angry at God, right? And then on the other hand, you realize you can lean on that and say, well, there's a higher power, there's a greater order to things, and so I don't understand it, but there's a meaning, and so I'm going to rely and lean on that meaning to have it make some sense in some way.
Yeah.
And so that became my comfort. But I didn't become more religious. I think I became more spiritual.
Does her memory live on in you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, all the time. And oddly enough, before I got pregnant with my daughter, I had 3 miscarriages. And then I got pregnant before recycling, so I never got my period. I was getting my hepatitis B booster vaccine in med school, and the nurse said I was complaining that I hadn't gotten my period in like 2 months, and she's like, well, let's just check a pregnancy test. I was like, I don't think I'm pregnant. I haven't even, I just went through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I was 2 months pregnant, and my sister's birthday was October 26th, and my daughter's birthday was October 23rd.
Oh my gosh, that's a little bit more than coincidence, yeah.
So there's all of these things, and I mean, we make up things what we want to make up things, but I choose to see that connection, and they have a lot in common. They're different people, but they have a lot in common, and my daughter is my savior in many ways.
So your background is interesting. Your Persian background, your last name is Day, and Doris Day is a very famous name. So can you tell us a little about growing up with the name Doris Day, the same name of the famous actress Doris Day?
I know, it's crazy people don't know who that is right now.
Yeah.
So I'm named Doris after Doris Day.
You were named after her,
yes,
wow.
But my last name wasn't Day. So my last name was Bakhshan Day.
Okay, that's a big difference.
Exactly. So half of my relatives, they're doctors in California, and they're still Bakhshan Day. But what happened was my dad came here, and he was taking his medical boards.
He came from where?
Iran.
Iran.
Yeah.
What year?
In the 1950s.
1950s,
so he did
okay.
2 fellowships here, one in ENT and one in anesthesiology. And so my dad, when he was taking his boards, he had to put his name in the box, and it didn't fit, so it was Bakhshan Day. So then they truncated it. He says, oh, I will make it Doris Day. I will be Doris Day's father. So he legally changed his name. So when I was 2, I became Doris Day.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now, have you been to Iran?
Oh, yeah. We used to go every summer.
Really? What was that like?
It's magical. It's so magical. First of all, you learn to be a good flyer from a very young age.
Yeah.
Because my sister was born there. So my mom flew with me when she was pregnant to have my sister there. And so I mean, we've been flying since we were little, and that's a long flight.
Yeah.
So TWA and Pan Am, well, it was Pan Am mostly were the best. We get the pins, we go with the pilots, we got like TV dinners with the real silverware on the airplanes. They give you playing cards. Who doesn't love stuff? And then we would lie across the street, the seats, and go to sleep. And you wake up, 40 people to come pick you up from the airport. Everybody comes to pick you up. You go to your grandma's house, and there's a feast.
How much does your Iranian and Persian background influence you today?
Oh my God, so much, so much. I grew up listening to Persian music. I love the culture. I love the poetry. When I met my husband, we were just dating. We used to sit in the garden of my building where we still live, and he would translate poetry for me. And just
he was
me
born
poetry.
in Iran.
He came with the revolution. Yeah. So he was actually the only Jew in his class who got a scholarship to come to America to do a post-bac.
Wow.
And then while he was here, the revolution happened, and he couldn't go back. And he got a lot of his friends who were Muslim out and got them jobs even at NYU. So he was a very good resource for a lot of his family and friends and colleagues who were otherwise stuck there.
Do your children appreciate the Persian background?
Oh my God, so much. First of all, my son's wedding was just a few weeks ago, and they had Persian music at the wedding, and his wife is half Colombian and half and Jewish.
Yeah.
And so, but all his friends love the Persian music. People do love culture, but my kids love the music, they love the language, and we're teaching the grandbaby Farsi also.
So you speak Farsi, you speak French also,
yes.
right?
And English.
And do you think that immigrant mentality was part of what drove you to be a doctor and work hard?
I think so. I think you see your parents doing it, and they have very high expectations.
Yes.
And my uncles used to tell me all the time that when you're a doctor, it's important to always keep your hands in medicine and see patients. Like that should be the heartbeat of your work. But you should also work with industry. They felt really strongly too.
So in the Persian background, like a lot of traditional backgrounds, there's different roles for men and women.
Yeah.
How did that influence you as a young woman growing up in America? And even to this day today, with all the things changing with gender fluidity, how does your background influence the way you feel about it?
Well, in a way, it's a little bit confusing because on the one hand, Persian women, if I'm going to stereotype, and that's what I do, they're strong, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, my cousins were doctors. These are older women who are 20, 30 years older than me. And in Iran, they became doctors because the Shah was big on education, even for the women. So a lot of these women had big jobs. And my dad was one of 10, and some of the women who were his big sisters were very much feminists. So he grew up in a family where women had a say in things. And it was tough. I had a very complicated relationship with my dad because he was a great teacher, but I don't know that he was the most loving, affectionate father. So I believe in the idea of reframing. And you can look back at something in your life and say, and just remember things that were difficult or hurtful, even the loss of my sister. Or you can look back and look at it as a way of saying, these are the things that make me who I am, and I'm happy with who I am. So those were all good. And I choose, and I'm innately an optimist, so I choose to see the good. And from my sister, I think one of the biggest things I learned is you have to make something good out of everything, even when there's no good in it at all. And there's no good in what happened to her. I mean, the amount of suffering that she went through to die at the end.
Right.
I didn't understand it for the longest time. But then I read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And his idea that even that suffering, that life,
you have a choice to decide what you want to be, and that in itself, you can't take that away. That's Viktor Frankl's point. Yeah.
And just being alive under any circumstance is life, and that has its value. So
you choose, I like
life.
this idea, this concept that you choose to reframe something we were just mentioning, to find the optimistic viewpoint on it, which we all have that option, that opportunity to look at the situation like, no, there's a good in there.
Yeah, I mean, when I was heavy, my dad would tell me, we would be out with people and he'd say, okay, you ate enough, stop eating. Or he would call me every day and say, you're fat. And he wouldn't say, maybe you're depressed because your sister died and nobody's talking about it and you have feelings and maybe you think you killed her or that you're responsible for her death, or that maybe you were jealous of her and because she was so beautiful and so popular and you were a runt and you weren't very pretty. So there were so many things that you go through. I mean, there's no relationship that's perfect. But you know what? On the other side of it, I came out of it and I hit this rock bottom and I said, I have two choices. I could do more of this. It's not working for me. Or I could go this other way. And I chose the other way. And the weight just fell off.
But your dad being tough on you, you reframe it now. Do you look back and say, no, I'm glad he was tough on me and made me who I am?
I don't reframe it that way because I'm not. I think I don't know the answer. I can't reframe that because I don't know if I would have been any different. So I just ask myself the question, are you better because of him or in spite of him? And I don't know, but I'm here, so I'm okay.
So I'm really curious, like you were a young woman coming through school, medical school, back at a time period when maybe it wasn't so easy to go to medical school. What was that like for you?
Well, I was lucky because I was already in medical journalism school. So I didn't care.
What's medical journalism school?
So NYU had a program called the Science and Environmental Reporting Program. So I graduated college and then I did my pre-med after. Then I had that gap year.
So you were in medical journalism school?
Yeah, so it was a brand new program because the guy who was the managing editor of the New York Times when 3 Mile Island happened, the nuclear reactor meltdown, he sent all the journalists out to cover it, and they had no idea what a nuclear meltdown was. So he said, you know what, I need to start a journalism school for scientists to teach them to be reporters, because it's easier to teach a scientist to write than a reporter the science. Right. So that was the school, and I was the 6th class, and it was international, and there were 12 of us in the class, and we were really encouraged to work from day one. So, but I had to apply to med school to get in because I had to be a scientist.
So you had to be a med student to get into medical journalism
Well,
school?
I had to at least be applying to show that I was trying.
Okay.
So I only applied to 4 medical schools, and I thought I probably won't get in, I'll be done, and that'll be the end of it. I had good MCAT scores, so maybe, but I was not a scientist. I was an English major, and I took the basic sciences. So I never even took biochem. I didn't even take calculus. I just took chemistry, biology, organic, and physics.
Okay.
So I figured that'll be the end of it. I would have tried, but I'll already be in school and it'll be fine. But while I was in school, HIV was coming up because this was in the 80s. So I covered a lot of conferences about HIV, and one of the presenting signs is Kaposi sarcoma, which is in the skin as a presenting finding of AIDS. And so I learned a lot about dermatology from that. And then I got into medical school, got into downstate, and I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I have to go. But going to med school was interesting. Only 30% of my class were women. All the professors were men. And it was not a very hospitable environment for women. So I had two problems. One is the handsiness. I could tell you stories about things that professors did that were incredibly unethical. And
really, this is before the Me Too environment also.
Yeah, and the thing was, you could complain, but then you're the problem because you're complaining to men who feel the same way. You could quit, which wasn't going to be an option, or your third option for me was be smarter than them. So I thought if I know the answer to every question and I show up first for everything and I'm the last to leave for everything, they have no choice but to see me as equal. So that was the route I figured I was going to strive for. But it didn't come easy because biochem was like Sanskrit for me. So I failed my first biochem test. And the professor pulls me aside and he puts his arm around me and he goes, my experience is people who fail this exam don't do very well in medical school. You're a pretty girl. You should drop out now. You could do something else. And I just thought...
You gotta send them a letter now and show them where...
I wanted tutoring. Like, I wanted help. I asked for help. But, I had never taken biochem, and I'm with biochem majors, and I'm 2 years out because that journalism school was 2 years. So I'm further out from any science. I'm all humanities, and I'm going in with people who are hardcore young scientists. Like, these are all biology, biochem, everything else majors. So this is for them a repeat, and for me, it's all brand spanking new. Even how you study science is completely different
So
than
was
how you
it
study
difficult being
humanities.
a woman at this time period?
So it was difficult in so many ways, and then it was also difficult because anatomy was reliving. My sister's loss was only 5 years before.
Yeah.
So now I'm in my mind going through so much of that loss again, and the whole idea of life and death, and why am I here? So I had a lot weighing me down, and I was very alone, like very lost. And I also ended a 4-year relationship with the guy that I was dating who was in medical school at NYU, and then it was just not the right relationship for me. So I went through so much turmoil as I was starting. So the idea of being a woman in a man's world was like the least of my problems. Yeah. In a way, it was just trying to
just another one of the issues you had to deal with at that time.
And so basically, it was really when we were studying the renal system, the kidneys, when I had my epiphany of like, I love science, I love the body. It was the countercurrent multiplier. I just thought, it's incredible how the kidney makes urine. I just found that like the most incredible, fascinating thing. Like, this is the hardest thing in the world, and this kidney just does it. And so I thought it was amazing. I still think, thank you, I still think my kidneys every time I pee. And I love neurology.
You love neurology?
I think the brain is absolutely fascinating. But back then, you could say, I know exactly where that lesion is in the brain, but I can't do a thing.
Can you explain to us a little bit?
This looks so good.
This is incredible. Okay. So I love thin pizza. This is very thin.
Yeah, so we do a little different styles, not like Napolitano. It's more New York style, a little lower.
What's the difference between Napolitano and New York?
Tell him how New York has the best pizza in the world, because he's from Chicago.
No, I'm from Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. New York, of course, has the best pizza.
Yeah.
We do a lower oven. The hydration of the dough is a little lower, and then Napolitano, it's like really super high hydration, super high heat.
Yeah.
So it goes a little slower. We take our time a little bit. And it gets nice and crispy on the bottom. And the big thing is the texture. It's a texture. So if you like crispy pizza, if you want to chew,
Wait, so it's New York and Napolitano, but they're different, right? New York.
Right, different styles. Right, absolutely. The Napolitano is very, cooks much faster.
Yes.
So the dough has to be much wetter, a little bit chewier. And so, here we get a nice lower oven on the bricks. And
is this wood fired?
Nice and crispy. No, it's not wood fired. This is gas fired.
Is there a difference to you?
Yeah. I mean, the gas, wood fired, again, it's all temperature based, goes much faster.
Gotcha. So I was in Matera, Italy earlier this year in Puglia area, and we had fantastic pizza. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, my daughter was in Puglia this summer too, and she loved it. They had great pizza.
What's not to love? I mean, seriously.
They had a great
Puglia, Cuomo had the best pizza there too.
Pizza's hard to not make. I mean, there's good pizza and there's great pizza, but there's never really bad pizza.
Oh, no. I've had bad pizza.
You have?
Yeah, because it's not real cheese. It's like oil and water, and it's like not real dough. It's like cardboard. Like there's pizza here that you can get like $1 a slice or something, and I don't know what they put in that, but it's not really pizza.
Right. I mean, good pizza. I mean, there's technique involved, but it's really simple. It's like
you say it's simple, but when it's good, it's simple.
Good cheese.
When I decided to come out here, I asked her to pick her favorite pizza place, and she picked this place. So.
Yeah. And my daughter lives right near here, and this is her favorite place. We order from here all the time, and it's reliably fantastic. Like we've never ever had bad food from here. Reliably great.
That's great. That's great news.
All right, now we gotta try it.
All right, we're gonna try it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you put the crushed pepper on your pizza?
Yeah, I do it all. But I'm gonna give you this piece first. But I wanna go to your concept in journalism because you were a journalist major, and to me that's such a fascinating background.
And I worked all the way through med school.
Not many people have a journalism background,
Yeah.
And that's got to make. We're so funny. We're both like so immigrants from different countries. Because we before we even eat our food, we're already
but
seasoning
I like
it.
hot pepper on it. I know it's not hot pepper, and I love basil.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna get the journalism because I think this is fascinating. You're a journalism major because being a journalism major is definitely gonna have an influence. One is today you're doing a doctor radio show, and you've been on doctor radio for
16 years.
16 years. And you're all over, and many people see you on TV. I know you've done Regis and Kathy and Good Morning America and all these shows. You're always on one of the shows. Does all that help you? Your journalism background, does it help you for that?
I think so. I think it's also just doing it a lot helps me, and I naturally seem to speak in sound bites. So I think it all kind of feeds on itself, and you definitely get better at things the more you do it.
Right.
I used to do the medical news headlines for Fox 5, Channel 5 News locally in New York. And then we'd go to meetings, and at the end of the meeting, I would like summarize everybody's talks, and everyone would be like, "You're so good at summarizing our talks," and it's because I had to do it to be on TV. So you don't even realize like how it helps you.
I did a year at Fox News and a year at ABC News in Chicago early on in my career, and it made such a big difference because you learn how to speak to the public in a way that doesn't make it sound too complicated and fun. So there's no doubt that
radio's good for that.
Yeah, and you're great at it. I mean, I see you do it on stage all the time. But does a journalism background create ways in which you ask questions or question the science, so to speak, or dive deeper? Like there's certain fundamentals of journalism to unrelated sources. Like does that philosophy come out through your medicine?
I'm a little bit disappointed in medicine right now because I feel like we stopped asking questions and we stopped being inquisitive and we've become very polarized, which isn't how I see medicine. Not polarized in terms of our debating on science, but our polarization on being able to debate the science. And I find
That's a really important point, and I know that this is a big issue, I think, in medicine, and it's really come to a head in the last probably 18 months to 2 years. Is medicine has always been a field in which debate is part of it, and science always turns over itself. Like the only thing that's constant is that we're always changing our treatment regimen.
As we should, because we learn from what we've done. I don't inject the same way now as I did 5 years ago.
Right.
We don't have the same products even. I mean, we have the same, but we have so many more choices. Our understanding of aging has changed. Even our understanding of anatomy. I know you spoke with Sebastian Codafana, and even as an anatomist, he's always learning and teaching about anatomy. When you think we would know everything by now, but we're still learning. So the aging process is fascinating. I think telling stories is really important. Making it relatable is really important, and that's the journalistic side of me that likes making it relatable. And I think the other side is having lived a life, having traveled the world from a young age, I understand that I'm treating a person, and that everybody who wants something from me aesthetically is asking something of me emotionally as well. And I need to help them make that
So
connection.
what's more important, the aesthetic desire or their emotional desire when the patient comes to you?
Well, I think the emotional desire is more important because if they don't emotionally get it, they won't see it, and they won't get the aesthetic. So how many patients do you see who are so overfilled,
Yeah.
but either they think they look great or they think they need more, but they don't see the problem, right? So they're missing the emotional connection, because emotionally they're still seeing a flaw, they're not seeing beauty, and they're not seeing a balance. So I think what our job is as aesthetic physicians and as healers is to make that connection. So if somebody has something that's out of balance, or they come in, they ask for something and it's inappropriate, it's my job to help them see things better, and I think that's the emotional connection.
No, I think that I'm more a psychiatrist with a needle, which I think Michael Caine put it like that,
Yeah.
than I am like an aesthetic provider, because I think I use my tools, and whether it's surgery, non-surgical injectables or fillers, skincare, or nothing at all, my goal is to make that patient happy.
Yeah.
And
I love
sometimes
that
it's just a
expression.
conversation.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes. If a patient walks out the door and they're happy, I think I've succeeded. And I just use one of the tools that I have.
Right.
And I think once I made that switch in my practice, it completely and utterly took off, and I got really busy. And at the time when I was going through plastic surgery, it was all about, man, make someone perfect, make someone perfect. But that's not really what somebody
Not
wants.
if they don't see it.
No.
And I think when somebody comes in and they say, I don't like this line, it doesn't mean they want you to fill that line.
Right.
They're telling you something about what they see. Is it something they saw in their mother or a relative or their father? Something that's reminding them of their mortality. And your job is to say, okay, well, let's talk about that and figure out where it's coming from. And I think that's where we are as healers. And this is our tool. And a lot of patients will tell me this feels like a therapy session, but I think I like the way you put it. It's like a therapist with a needle or a device or a tool.
So how did you get to dermatology?
Well, part of it was as a journalist covering the medical side.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting story of how I even got my first job. We were encouraged to work from the early in our schooling. So there was a job board, and there were no cell phones. There were barely computers. We did all our exams on manual typewriters. I mean, this is going back a bit, right? So there's a job board. They post the job, and everybody runs to the payphone to try to call to see if they can get an interview to get this job for one of the what we call throwaway magazines, like AIDS Patient Care or Oncology Times.
Right.
So the editor was on vacation, so everyone's like, oh, okay, we'll call back. So I look and I see the address is on Park Avenue, not far from where the school is, and kind of on my way to my parents' house. So I said, you know what, let me just stop by. I mean, somebody should be there, because I'm sure the newspaper's still running. It doesn't close because the editor's on vacation. So I go upstairs, and the associate editor's there, and she said, oh, funny you should show up. I have these 3 articles I need to have written. If you can write it and you do a good job, I'll hire you. So I got the job.
So you were writing for...
I just showed up.
Isn't that half the battle?
Yeah, it is. I just showed up, literally showed up at the office, cold called, just said, I'm from the SERP program at NYU, and I heard that you have a job opening. I know the editor's on vacation, but I'd love to learn more about it, and if maybe when they come back, I could schedule an interview. And she's like, well, actually, I have these openings. So that's how I got my first writing.
And this was for a magazine.
And I got paid for it.
And this is amazing. And did that lead you to dermatology?
Well, it did, because I covered a lot of dermatology things through Kaposi sarcoma, because HIV was a thing. So when I was in med school, I really liked neurology, but you couldn't do anything, so I didn't like that. I love the kidneys, but nephrology was too hard for me. Like
Right.
I appreciated them, but I didn't want to actually have to treat them. And then I realized that I did mostly internal medicine before I did derm, and I didn't match in derm my first try or second try. So it took my 3rd try before I matched, because I met my husband while in med school. We got married. He's established in New York, so I could only apply to derm programs in New York. I had my first kid in med school, my second after my internship at Bellevue. And my daughter's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm tied to New York, and it's the most competitive thing to do. So I did a year of research, and I did more medicine, which has only served me well, because there's so much medicine in derm, and the research has helped me in developing skincare lines and doing other work, and I know how to read research studies. So there's no failure. There's quitting or there's succeeding and learning from whatever happens. So I kept thinking, I'm just going to try again. And they're going to take somebody, so they should take me. But I was limited to where I could apply. And that's the excuse I'm going with.
So how'd you get to aesthetics?
So when I started my career, there were no aesthetics. I mean, Botox wasn't FDA approved yet. We had 2 lasers. We had the Erbium and the CO2, which were fully ablative. And hair removal was just beginning. We had Zyderm and Zyplast, and then Cosmoderm and Cosmoplast, which are basic collagen that lasted a few months, that were line chasers. So there was nobody doing aesthetics, and as things came up, there was nobody there, but I was there. So I feel like, you know, those surfers are riding a wave, and you kind of catch the wave. I kind of caught the wave. And so I was one of the investigators for the first, for the clinical trials for the FDA for Restylane. And that got me into aesthetics. And I went to the NEF meetings for Allergan, which were the National Education Foundation meetings, and I met the Carruthers and Dr. Arnie Klein and all these icons in aesthetics. And what they taught me was the most incredible thing. You saw Jean Carruthers go up and say, I do it this way. And then Alistair, her husband, she lives with them, works in the same building, goes up and I do it this way. And like, they're completely different ways.
Right.
And they both got great results. Yeah. So I learned there wasn't only one right way. And that gave me courage, because once I learned that they don't know and they know everything as far as I know, that means that I can do it too, and that I can learn and I can get better at it. So I got to be one of those people that got to try every product as it came up, and got to sort of learn the flavors of these products and how they work, and just help grow the profession. And
so what do you think about today? Like back then, it was just getting started. There wasn't many people doing it.
Yeah.
Now there's loads of people doing it from everywhere. How do you define how it was back then, aesthetics, versus how it is today?
Well, I think back then we had some ignorant bliss in that we didn't know a lot of the things that could go wrong, and so we did things that maybe we wouldn't do today. But we also had a healthy respect for the products. And now I feel like they're very commoditized, and people still don't know a lot about what could go wrong or how long the products really last. And there's a lot of cookie cutter approach of just chasing lines and filling holes, and not as much of an approach of being a psychiatrist with a needle.
Or how about being an artist, like knowing what makes someone look good and why?
Yeah.
So how do you explain the people who look so overdone?
I don't. People who come to me have usually either seen somebody and they liked how they look, but I think there's the right doctor or injector for everybody, right? So there are people who want that, who either want a bargain or who just want a product, or they want whatever it is that they're seeing on social media, and they'll find someone to do it for them. And there's people who think that if somebody wants that and they're willing to pay for it, I should do it. That's not me. Yeah. So the people who find me want what I do, and I stay true to my aesthetic.
Well, why do you think there are people out there that look so strange? Are there doctors and providers doing treatments that just aren't appropriate, or aren't good? Do they not know what they're doing? Are they doing it for greed, for money?
I think it's probably all of that. I'm not really sure, because I mean, I say no all day long. I think it is something that you and Sabrina, oh my God, 1,000 times a day.
So what percentage of your patients come in do you say no to?
I would say maybe like 30%. But the people I say no to, I will direct them to what I could say yes to. So it may be skincare, maybe just sun protection, it may be nutritional, maybe sending them to a doctor who does hormone replacement, like something that I don't even do, right. But I'll help guide them. I don't just say no, I say yes, but not this. So I never want to just turn someone down. I'll help direct them towards what will get them to where they really want to go. and they have to understand that there's a long game to this. It's
Does
not.
the patient ever come and say, I want this brand name? And if
Well,
that happens,
sometimes it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's Botox versus Dysport, I'll do the Botox if they want Botox, or Dysport if they want Dysport.
Right.
But if I think it's something that I absolutely wouldn't do, I just won't do it. I mean, I won't do silicone. I won't do what I won't.
So how many people come in asking for a specific brand? What percentage of your patients come in?
Very few.
5%, 10%?
2%, like
Yeah, it's
very
rare.
few. They don't come to me asking for a brand. They come to me asking for my ideas, and they'll tell me what they see, because I want to know what they see and what they want.
Yeah.
But then I'll tell them the better way to get there, and what one of the things, because I'm a dermatologist, not a plastic surgeon, I always tell my patients there are things that I can do and things that I can't do. So sometimes what I need to do is refer them for surgery for things that I can't do. So if they have too much laxity and they need a facelift, that will make them happier. I will tell them, and then if a facelift is out of the question, then I'll say these are the things we can do, but it's not a facelift, and it's not going to get you to that same end goal. So one is you have to understand the patient's expectations, and two is what you can realistically do. And sometimes what we need to undo before we can redo.
Do you think companies realize that patients don't come in saying, I want this brand? Like, do you think the companies that are out there spending all this money to create these strong brands and strong awarenesses, do you think they recognize that a patient comes in and you can easily switch them to what you do?
I think their hope is that one is they can create some brand loyalty, and then the smart companies will say, look, if we grow the market, we'll grow into our product as well. But products definitely have become commoditized, where in some ways it's a race to the bottom, where the companies that buy in bulk will get the best price, sell it for cheapest, and sort of have the most play in the market.
Yeah.
And they have to fill their bottom line because they're for-profit companies. But my focus is on the doctors and my patients. So my hope is that a doctor will do what's right for the patient and not think of their bottom line, but think of the patients first.
And that's why you say no 30% of the time.
You know, it's 30. It's in a day. It could be more. It could be less. But it's no when it's no.
I saw a patient last week. She said, Dr. Dayan, I'm coming to you. I've never met you before, but you saw my friend and you didn't treat my friend. I'm like, wait, you're coming to see me? I didn't treat your friend? Yes, because you were so honest. You told her she didn't need anything, so I thought you're the person I need to see. I was like, you never realize how powerful no is.
And how many patients do you see who will go somewhere else and come back and go, you know what, you said no to that? Like the Botox in the forehead, they get a brow job, and they're like, okay, you said no, you were right, I get it, I'm back.
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
So you've been on TV, you're on every program. I don't know if this is the program Nick you're not on. How did that happen? Is this something that you went after, or is it something that came to you?
So I don't have PR, and I've never had PR.
You don't have PR?
Never. No.
That's unusual.
I know. You know what? It's sad that it's unusual.
In New York especially, it's unusual.
I know. But I have no desire for it. I always say I don't really want to be famous. I just want to be great at what I do. That is my goal in life. But what happened was, early on in my career, nobody had a website. So I went on register.com and registered myclearskin.com because I worked at the NYU Student Health Center, and the student was like, you cleared up my acne, you got to have a website, everybody's got a website, and it's got to be myclearskin.com because everything is my this, my that. So I made that. Then I went to register.com, to addme.com, added myself into all the search engines. And then I learned HTML to make my first website. So it wasn't
created your own website.
Yeah, because there was nobody who did this.
Yeah,
so I had to learn how to code, and it was fine. But then people started finding me because I had a website. And some PR company found me and had me do something, and then I started meeting people, and there was nobody. Thank you so much.
Hi, you.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
That's how you get me drinking.
All right, so you created your own website.
Yep.
And that's rogue in your day. And that's like the TikTok of your day.
This is 1998.
Right.
So this is all just coming up. And I really had to learn the difference between a website and an email address.
Right.
I mean, I knew nothing. So people started finding me from the website. And then companies back then had PR agencies. So like Allergan had one, and they were the main company. So they would pitch me to shows. And I would show up, and I would speak in English, and I'd be prepared, and I would bring stuff, and they would have to do no work. So they're like, oh, all right, we'll have her back, because she was reliable on air. She showed up. And then the producer from one show would go to another show and they would say, I like working with her on that show. I'm going to invite her onto this show. So it's as producers moved, as beauty editors moved from one magazine to another, they would just take me with them because I would show up and I wasn't selling anything and I would speak in sound bites and I knew when to stop talking, which is, as you know, I can
really
talk.
Hard to do, yeah. No.
So
especially after a couple of beers.
I know, and I'm not really a drinker. Yeah. So so that's what happened, and then I just did more and more stuff. So I used to be on Good Morning America every week. I met somebody at The View, and then I was on The View, and that producer went to Bethany, so I did Bethany 3 or 4 times.
And Barbara Walters too.
Barbara Walters and I became very good friends, and I used to tell her that I loved her all the time. She wasn't good with being adored. That came hard for her, but what an honor, what an incredible thing to know such an icon who was such a trailblazer for so many women.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, she was one of the most.
You knew her personally.
People. Yeah, we were very good friends, and she really brought me to The View a lot, and she did a whole special around work that I did. So that was a highlight of my career, and actually that was very difficult for me in a way because for me it was such an incredible moment. And I called my daughter after and I said, Sabrina, what if people like know me but don't like me or don't want to come to me or somebody gets mad at me? She goes, Mommy, you know that's not why you do this. And I was like, oh yeah, oh you're right, okay, I'm fine. So I went back because I realized like, yeah, that's not why I do it. Like it's not the goal of my life. That's the thing about social media.
I love what you say is that you want to be good at what you do. You don't want to be famous, and that's a big difference.
Great at what I do.
Great at what you do.
And it's constant work. I mean, there's no resting from that, right? So the second, wherever your high is your new normal, right? So if you're here, that's your normal, and your job is to go there.
Yeah.
There is no top, right? It's the practice of medicine for a reason. There's always more to know. You can always be better.
So medicine comes first. It's your primary goal to be great at what you do. Talk to me about, so you have media in your day and my day, now social media as replacing media, and is that different, and how do you view that in comparison to what you did?
Well, I'm also an educator, right, because I'm a journalist. I love telling stories and I love sharing what I know.
Yeah.
I've always been that way. So I have that good fortune of having both sides to me and being able to have both sides. So having a radio show, writing books, all those things are for a reason. It's because I have stories to tell. I need to talk about my sister. I need to share her life and her story because it keeps her alive in my heart. And not alive in my heart, it just, people need to know that these things happen and that there's value to life. Because it happens to everybody. We all go through things. Like you can look at someone's life and go, oh my God, they have it so good. Someone can look at my life and go, oh my God, she's married, she's got 2 kids, they just had a wedding. Her life is so good. Nobody's life is so good or so bad.
Everybody has a struggle.
Everybody has a story. Everybody has a struggle. Everybody has good. Everybody has bad.
Yeah.
And I can't take the people who think that everybody else has it better than them.
Right.
Like those people irritate me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think if I can, one, share my stories, but also make you not feel like you're not the only one. Like I want to know your story too.
Yeah.
And I want to share those stories. So
social media your outlet for doing that today?
Yeah. Social media is my outlet for speaking my truth. And I like that about social media, that it kind of evens the playing field in a way. When I look at different doctors on social media or people on social media, their authentic self eventually comes through. Like I look at colleagues, some are curmudgeon-y, and they're curmudgeon-y on social media.
Yeah.
Some are silly, and they dance and they do things that I'm like, oh my God, I would never do that. But they're themselves on social media. So I think the true you comes through on social media, and your audience will find you. But in terms of patience, I started doing something like my taxi cab ride recap of the meeting I just went to.
Yeah, I love it.
People love that. Like, it was just on a whim, and I thought, I'm in a taxi going home. I'll just talk about the meeting, and I'll make it an IG Live and see who shows up. And people just think it's the coolest thing, and it's all fresh in my head. So I'm sharing what I know, what I went through. And my husband, who's such a critic of all this, he was like, oh, this is great, do this more. And he's like, but tell more personal stories. So people do want to know personal things, so you have to be careful how you balance it.
Where do you think social media, or what should patients think when they look at social media when they choose a doctor?
Well, I think of my social media for my patients as a way for them to, I think of it as an icebreaker, like my radio show too. I get patients from the radio show all the time, and I talk for 2 hours at a time, so people really get to know me. And I think the nice thing about that is people who follow on social media or who follow on radio, who come to you, you now have a group of people who want what you are, and it sort of cuts through the idea that you have to figure that out. So it kind of breaks the ice and makes that whole introduction that much easier, and you get to the treatment side faster. So people come in and they go, I feel like I know you, because they know my dad's story, they know my sister's story, they know my life story, they know about my kids, because I talk about all that.
So the patient should find the authentic doctor through social media. Can they be misled by social media?
Well, if you're only seeing before and afters, and you think that's all that doctor does, and all their before and afters are 100% perfect, yeah, you can be misled. Because the before and afters you see on social media, as much as we try to make them as authentic as possible, I mean, some people try harder than others, for sure. I mean, I look at some people on social media and they're doing all these live injections, and they take people who I think are already overfilled and they're still filling them, and I think, okay, well, somebody is posting on that or commenting, that's great, I need that. That's their doctor. They're never going to come to me.
Yeah.
I don't want them to come to me.
Is social media good or bad for aesthetic medicine?
It's neither good nor bad. I mean, first of all, it's not going away. So we have to find the good in it and try to bring out the good of it and hope for the best. And I think social media is going to be nothing compared to AI.
Yeah?
So
Okay. That's for next year.
AI is incredible.
Yeah.
And also a little scary.
It is. That's a whole nother dinner. Tell me about if you had a young student that wanted to go into dermatology today, what advice would you give to a young person today in saying, hey, if you want to go into dermatology, you want to go into aesthetics, I recommend you do this?
With my daughter and daughter-in-law are both going to be derms.
Okay, so what's the advice you give to them?
Do it. Just do it, learn. There's not enough time in the day to learn all the dermatology and medicine there is to learn. Save the social media for when you're in practice, not for when you're a student or a resident.
Okay. What do you think of key opinion leaders? What does that mean to you?
You know, I got something once and said, how do you become a key opinion leader? And I was like, that's an odd question. I said, think. I don't even know what that means. So I think it's something that's ethereal. You know, it's there. To be an opinion leader is, I don't know. I think it's something that is in retrospect in a lot of ways.
It's not something that you aim to be. It's something that you become because someone you can't call yourself an opinion leader, right?
Exactly. But people who do, I find that laughable.
Yeah.
So yeah, when people ask about that, I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, it's just somebody wants my opinion. I'm happy to share it. So yeah, I think that's it doesn't make sense to me. And I think the people that we remember sort of rise up, the Arnie Kleins, the Carruthers, the Michael Caines of the world, even the Sebastian Cotafanos, the Steve Dayans. They're people we remember because we produce, right? When you produce work and when you share what you know and you're generous of that, and you share so willingly, I think that is what makes you a leader.
I have students and fellows every year, and I say to them, if you want to make a difference, you have to come up with some creative thought that's meaningful, and then you have to research it and write it and give it to us. Just because you can do a lot of injections doesn't necessarily make you someone that everybody wants to know or be around. No. You got to come up with something creative, something unique, some insight, and make a meaningful difference, and then people will respect you or follow you.
I agree, and I think it also has to be consistency over time. And a lot of that is the love of the work that you do. It's wanting to be innovative, it's wanting to invest in the work and not doing it for the fame. One of I think the sad things I see now is that people look to be famous, they look for followers, they look for for just being famous or
Yeah.
having value that way. But I try to tell them, I said, you know, at one time there wasn't Instagram. At one time there won't be Instagram.
Right.
The playing field gets evened over and over again. What you have is who you are, what you know, what you can give. And I saw this great line once, and it said, the person you spend the most time in your life with is you. So try to make yourself as interesting as possible. So I thought, you know what, that's true. I spent most of my time with me. And I actually am my biggest fan. Like, I laugh the hardest at my own jokes. I think I'm hilarious. And I amuse myself all day long. And I'm happy when I can bring somebody else in, but I don't need that. I don't count on that. I do like to share what I know. It makes me happy when somebody else gets it, because I know I'm so happy when I learn something new. So I'm happy to share when I learn something like, oh my God, I just learned this. Did you know this? This is the greatest thing. So,
Okay, if you had all the time and money in the world, what would you do? If you woke up Saturday morning and you're fabulously rich and you had plenty of time, you had no obligations, how would Doris Day spend her day?
I don't know. You know what? Having gone through what I did with my sister, I can tell you, it's hard to put yourself in a situation that you've never been in. Like, I think I would never want to go through these things, or I would do that. But until you're in that situation, you don't really know. My thinking is I would do a lot of what I'm doing, but I would probably travel more than I do now, or spend more time when I go someplace being there than thinking that I have to get back to go to work.
Right.
I would, I think that's my main thing is I love traveling. I love seeing the world. But I would continue to study and learn. I love learning about other cultures and about their way of seeing health. And I really am focused on longevity, and I would study a lot more. I would get more into longevity, and I would start to build companies around longevity.
Crazy. So the future for Doris Day includes what? I know you have a skincare line out, and that's got to be fun for you.
I'm working on a new one that I think is going to be the most incredible thing. It's things that don't exist today that I think within a year or so we'll have on the market that are going to change the way your skin ages. And we're working on both prescription and non-prescription formulas of it. So my focus is on health, and health through beauty, and I think it goes beyond beautiful. So I want to have a podcast called Beyond Beautiful. I want to make a show called Beyond Beautiful that shares beauty secrets from around the world. I have big plans, big goals. I have 2 daughters, daughter-in-law who are going to be dermatologists. I have a grandbaby, one coming. I got a lot going on.
So you're not slowing down at all.
No.
And I should also mention we're now partners. We're part of the same group,
Yes.
so I'm super excited.
And I'm there because of you.
Uh-oh.
You said you're in. I'm like, okay, introduce me. Like, if you did this, because I know that you thought long and hard before you did it, and you walked away from something to walk to this. So I think that's a big deal. And before we go, I need an autographed copy of your book.
Yeah.
I will tell you that one of the things that I found most inspirational about you is that you are so great at getting things out of other people. Like, you actually listen, and you're genuinely curious about how other people think and feel, and that's so rare. It's so rare. And when you write beautifully and thoughtfully, but you really are a true philosopher.
Oh.
So I'm really excited to read your new book, and I'd love to have it autographed by you.
Okay, I for sure will autograph it.
And I love that it's beyond the obvious, because my book is Beyond Beautiful. So I think beyond is such a great word because it takes you to another level. So.
And you are the first person that bought my book. So I have to say that.
So
the first
honored.
order came through was from you.
And I'll be the first person that reviews it.
Thank you.
So, but I want to actually read the whole thing first, so it might be a week or so because I'm going to read every single word of it. Because I do love your writing.
Okay, I'll definitely sign it.
All right, good.
Wait, also, can you get the rapid fire questions?
I'm still eating the pizza.
Yeah, no, you get the rapid fire questions before you go. Okay. Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Ketchup or mustard?
Ketchup.
Autumn or spring?
Autumn.
Booth or table?
Booth.
Apple or Android?
Android, but I have an Apple.
You're supposed to pick one. Okay.
But Android, if I had to, yeah.
Spicy peppers or mild peppers?
Oh, spicy.
You like spicy, huh?
Spicy.
Mexican or Italian food?
Oh my goodness. Italian.
Italian. If you're on a plane, an aisle or a window?
If I'm flying to New York, window, because I love the view of Manhattan coming in.
Okay.
Otherwise, aisle.
Otherwise, aisle. Okay, and Taylor Swift or Beyonce?
Beyonce. Beyonce. So I have 3 characters in my head that I try to emulate. So in my mind, I see these character actors who do different people, and so I thought I'm going to do this too. So for beauty, I imagine when you look at me, you're seeing Raquel Welch. So she's my image of beauty. So in the mirror of my mind's eye, I look just like Raquel Welch. So when I go to an event and I have to be graceful, when I go with my husband and I see his family and I do stuff, it's Grace Kelly. So I walk in and I try to have that grace. When I go to inject my patients and I have to bring my A game, it's Beyonce. I walk in and I see her walking down this aisle with this beautiful outfit, and everybody who's anybody is there. She's honoring some great singer. She walks on stage, the fan is blowing, her hair goes, she takes the mic and she nails every single note. That's me taking care of patients. Because you can't have a bad day when you're injecting or taking care of patients. Because for them, it's 100%. You've got to bring your Beyonce every time.
That's awesome. So Beyonce inspires you, Barbara Walters inspires you, and you inspire me.
Aw, and you inspire so many people, including me.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.